ADCC doesn't test for performance enhancing drugs at all. You can literally come in sauce to the gills and it's all good. Whereas IBJJF, they have now started to test at the highest levels, usually like black belt finals for the adult divisions, right? So even though IBJJF is playing this whole angle that they're cutting out PEDs from their organization, yes, they are in certain ways, but for the most part, you can still get juiced up and go to IBJJF. They only test a very small percentage of the athletes, right? Only the top guys, the guys that are consistently crushing at the highest levels get tested, and pretty much everyone else can go in there juiced up.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Delbra.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Essential Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Essential Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu-Jitsu. And this week, we're going to be discussing ADCC versus IBJJF. We're going to contrast the rule sets, the role of the referee in the different competitions, and the tournament experience from the two different organizations. But first, if you like the show, I'd please ask that you like, share, and subscribe. Talk to people that you train with about the show if you enjoy it. Here we go. Before we get started on today's discussion of the rule sets, I would like to talk about a tournament that I did over the weekend, and this was the BCJJF Regionals. This was a pretty frustrating day for me. I did two divisions. I did my Gi division and the black belt middleweight division. I had an old opponent that I fought before in no-gi. His name is Lucas Wilhan. He is the head instructor and owner of Lapel Arts in Vancouver, BC. So he's kind of a local rival here. We fought a couple times in no-gi, and this was the first time I've ever fought him in the gi. I have trained with him in the gi before. We're kind of buddies, but we do compete against each other. He's very tall, very lanky, and I am sort of short and stocky, especially for a middleweight. I'm actually a lightweight, but I like to compete at middleweight. And it was a pretty slow tournament, I would say. So I was just happy to get a match, and we were actually in a best 2 out of 3 division. And he ended up beating me twice in a row. Each match I lost by 2 points. And it was very frustrating. I couldn't score on him all day. He's very difficult to submit. And it was pretty close matches, but in the end, he definitely, I would say, out-grappled me. And of course, the scoreboard reflected that. There was a couple takeaways from the match from the matches, I should say. Some pros and cons. Of course, it's never fun to lose, but I did make a huge mistake. I missed a cue. I pulled guard at the same time as him, and the referee didn't make the guard pull gesture. And I remember not seeing that gesture, but still going about my business and not standing up, which I totally should have, because I missed my opportunity to pull guard, and he stood up and got his 2. And that was, it should have been communicated by my corner for sure, but it was my fault for missing that. And I remember even at the time looking at the ref and thinking, he didn't put his hand up to check his watch. He didn't give me the gesture, and I missed my opportunity, and Lucas came up for his 2. So I was kind of caught sleeping at the helm. And that was really, really frustrating. I'm probably going to be fighting Lucas again in a variety of rule sets, gi and no gi, and hopefully training with him again soon. He's actually a really great guy, very talented grappler. And he's also ranked number 1 in the ADCC Open 76 kilogram. He just won the ADCC Adult Expert Division in Costa Mesa, California. So congratulations, Lucas. It's always good to test myself against you. And then in the no-gi division, usually in no-gi divisions, I do pretty well. I very rarely get submitted in competition, but I actually got submitted in the finals. So I walked away from the tournament with double silver, unfortunately. And I lost in possibly the most embarrassing way. I got buggy choked in the finals. My opponent was very strong, very muscular. He must walk around, I would say, probably at 190, 195 at least, and cut down to middleweight. He was shredded, and I know people who have trained with him before. I believe his name was Chiz from Factory Fresh BJJ, and Chiz is a very high-level track athlete, to my knowledge, and I believe he's a purple belt as well. So it just goes to show that someone who doesn't have as much experience as me could be good at a couple of moves, and anyone can lose at this level. And it's kind of interesting. I saw him hunting legs. He's ankle locked one of my blue belt students, I believe, a year ago. So I was expecting strong ankle locks. He was trying to clearly grab the ankle lock. He was grabbing my foot and very, very strong. As soon as he grabbed my foot, I was like, holy shit, this guy has incredibly strong grips. I didn't feel any heat on the ankle locks. I was able to just pummel my legs free, but it was even difficult clearing my foot. And then I got on top and I immediately started my passing game, in which case he immediately turned to the side and gave me a side body lock, which to me is like a Christmas present on most people. I just jumped on it. And I totally forgot how strong this guy is. He locked up a buggy choke on me. And if you're not familiar with a buggy choke, if you're not a nerd like me, a buggy choke is like essentially a head and arm, a katagatame, but it's done with your arm and your leg. So you're actually strangling your partner in between your arm and your leg, and I suppose against your lat muscle. And I've never felt a buggy choke this tight. Excuse me. I've felt buggy chokes in training before. This was a reverse buggy choke, I believe it's classified as, where my partner was actually turning away from me, and it was incredibly tight. I tried to apply pressure to my partner, flatten him out. I tried to frame across his neck, couldn't relieve any of the pressure of the strangle, and I could hear his heart beating, and I could hear his breathing because my head is positioned right next to his chest, essentially as he is strangling me with his torso. And I could tell that he wasn't stressing. He was very relaxed and incredibly strong. So I just tried to make his best posture as I could and open up my shoulders and chest. And from this position, I felt it loosen slightly. I tried to make an escape and then it tightened up from that position. I couldn't escape and I had to tap out or I would have gone to sleep. And, sometimes it's good to have wake-ups like this in competition. It's good to have matches where you lose in weird ways, you get embarrassed even, because those are the matches where those will always be lessons that you'll never forget. And the main lesson that I missed was that for such a strong opponent, sometimes implying intense pressure chest to chest can be risky, especially if you're going to side control. And again, I must have been off of my game this day because I saw him attempt a buggy choke on a previous opponent. He wasn't successful, but I regret not having sirens going off in my head thinking, hey, this guy goes for buggy chokes, be careful passing around to the side. And it was a very well-timed play. It was a trap that was well set, and I fell right for it, and I got caught. Very, very cool, actually. I have to appreciate how awesome it was. I don't get submitted often in competition. Like I said, it's I find my no-gi game pretty crafty, and I'm pretty defensively sound. And my hat goes off to this Chiz character. Hopefully I meet him again. And yeah, it was not a very good day for me. The first match in my no-gi division, my opponent didn't show up, which is always frustrating. Especially local tournaments, you always want to get as much competition as you can. And then my second match was against one of my students, John Chan from Nimbus Grappling Athletics, which is a really great friend of mine who has gone on to open his own academy. So I wasn't really thrilled about fighting him. And then my third match was against this Chiz character who just embarrassed me in front of everyone. It was a total shock to everyone who watching because locally, most people know who I am here in Vancouver and expected me to get that win for sure. Like I said, my hat goes off to him. I will say one positive takeaway that I got from this tournament was my warm-up felt great. I've been struggling to find a warm-up routine that kind of prepares me the way that I want to be prepared for going into my first fight. Usually the first fight for competitions for me, I really struggle. I struggle to be able to recover quickly and to adapt to the initial blitz, I guess, if you want to call it, of the first match. And then as matches progress throughout the day, if I keep winning, things get easier for me traditionally. And this tournament, I had a great warm-up. When I went in against Lucas for the first match, I felt very, very warm. I recovered well for the second one, and I was able to go all day. So I feel like I got a really good warm-up that and I sort of found a routine that I really, really liked. It was just a mix of very, very light stretching and calisthenics and some good old-fashioned positional gripping and drilling and whatnot, and worked really well. I think I'm going to try that again from now on. And it just helped me manage my nerves so well. I didn't feel at all exhausted going through all my matches. I just couldn't get those scores against Lucas. So that was super frustrating for me. And I realized that my gi game needs work, and I want my gi game to be as good as my no gi game. I think the main thing that I'm lacking is a lot of strength in my hands. My hands get pretty badly damaged in the gi, as I'm sure so many people that are listening deal with this problem as well. But that's no excuse. My gi game shouldn't revolve around the strength of my hands, and I am looking forward to reinvigorating my gi game, especially with some tournaments coming up. So that was a fun tournament, even though it kind of sucked. And next weekend is Prime BJJ Series, another local tournament here. It's a newer tournament. It's, I would say, probably the closest experience that you will have in Vancouver to the IBJJF tournament experience. Very professionally run by my two friends, Rafael Laporta and Eddie. I can't remember Eddie's last name. He's the head owner of Burnaby BJJ, and Rafael Laporta is the owner of GF Team Canada here in Vancouver. So some local gym owners coming together to build another place where we can go and test our jiu-jitsu skills. So thank you to all of the tournament organizers, obviously, for just increasing the level of jiu-jitsu around us, allowing us to compete here in Vancouver. All right. So before we discuss these rules, I would just like to say as a disclaimer, I am not an expert, even though I am a black belt and I am I'm not a certified IBJJF referee, but I've done the ref certification course. So I do have some knowledge in the topic. I do referee, but again, I get things wrong. I'm just a human like anyone else. So during this podcast, if I misunderstand the rules, please do not hate me. And feel free to correct me in the comments wherever you are watching or listening this podcast. Okay, let's discuss the importance of the rule. So any competitor, we've talked about this before. I think that's some of the most low-hanging fruit that any competitor can grab is understanding the rule set of the competition they're going in. You know, you'd be surprised how many competitors go into competitions, especially at the lower ranks, where they literally have no idea what the goal of the competition is. And that's really, really important that you consider that going in. You know what submissions are legal, especially at the kids levels, because certain kids competitions get all different types of rule sets. You understand how long you're going to be fighting for. You understand if there's points on the board. You understand if the rules vary greatly in terms of how you can get your scores. And we're going to discuss that today, contrasting IBJJF and ADCC. And of course, sub only versus points, etc. So it's very important for every competitor to understand the rule set. And that is just, if you're going to compete, you have to spend some extra time off the mat studying the rule set and then bring those scenarios to the training situation so that you can kind of ingrain it into you and your teammates who are planning on competing. If you're an average Joe who has no desire to compete, I still think it's important to understand the rules so that you can help your teammates out and you can play the game of jiu-jitsu from the perspective that I guess it was meant to be played in a tournament setting. So let's contrast these rule sets. Basically, I'll just go through the biggest differences, I would say, between ADCC and IBJJF. And hopefully, if you're a competitor, you will learn something from this. I'm sure if you're a seasoned competitor, there might not be so much to learn about, but I might have some opinions that you agree or disagree with. So here we go. First of all, the thing that I really like about ADCC is there's no advantages. Again, advantages, it's a love-hate thing. I know a lot of people are okay with advantages because they do signify a near score. I know other people who really don't like advantages. I've been on both sides of the spectrum. Sometimes I win a match by an advantage and I'm like, whew, I'm glad I won that. And then other matches you lose by an advantage and you're like, well, that's just so stupid, right? I like in ADCC how there is no advantages and how it is kind of difficult to score in an ADCC situation. Another thing I really like about ADCC is that there are no penalties. Instead, in ADCC, if you get penalized, it's just a negative point. I really like this format. I think that that's important. Of course, for those of you who aren't familiar with the IBJJF scoring model, there's points, advantages, penalties. So if the points are even, it's the most advantages wins. If the points and the advantages are even, it is the fewest penalties that win. And if all the scoreboards are equal across the board, then it is a referee's decision based on things that happened during the match that were not on the scoreboard. So a near advantage, perhaps, that didn't go on the scoreboard, the referee remembers that for next time. So that's really cool. So let's now discuss possibly the biggest difference, I guess, in between ADCC and IBJJF, and that would be the fact that half of the ADCC match is no score. The first half of the competition the first half of the match is no points, so essentially sub only, and then the second half of the match, points turn on, and the match just continues, and the referee calls out points. Pretty interesting contrast that is completely different from IBJJF, and I guess you could say a lot of these different rule sets favor other grappling styles, ADCCs, I should say. So, maybe the jiu-jitsu guys can come out and pull guard in the first half of the match, but in the second half of the match, if you pull guard, it's a penalty or a -1 point. Okay, so guard pullers can pull in the first half and not in the second half without a penalty. And also, after the regulation period of ADCC, it goes through the sub only, and then the points turns on. After that, it goes into an overtime round where any guard pulling at all is a -1 point. So again, it kind of does favor wrestlers in certain ways. Wrestlers with good jiu-jitsu. It's ADCC essentially, if I could summarize it, is a wrestling tournament with submissions. And we can see watching ADCC how prevalent wrestling is and how guys with good wrestling skills progress deeper into the division and deeper throughout the tournament. And so another really big difference between these two organizations is that the IBJJF bases a lot of their competition around the guard, or the idea of the guard. So for example, if you wanted to sweep in IBJJF, we need to get our guard first. Whereas in ADCC, a reversal from the bottom, whether it's from bottom side control or bottom mount or bottom knee on belly even, sweeps from these positions, or should I say reversals from these positions, will be scored if the positions are held for 3 seconds, just like in IBJJF. But in IBJJF, a guard must be established first. I actually really don't like this rule because I think there are legit reversals from the bottom that can be done with intent and with control and land the bottom athlete in an extremely advantageous position. And I believe that that is something that IBJJF should change. I believe that an UPA sweep from the bottom mount position or a bridging rolling escape from bottom side control that lands the position inverted and now the bottom player's on the top is in the top position and side control. I think these positions should be scored personally. And that's one thing that I would like to see change. But again, I'm not holding my breath. IBJJF is very, very rigid in their belief that jiu-jitsu should be based around the guard. And it definitely favors guard players more in IBJJF. You don't need to be a great wrestler to be a world champion, world no-gi champion or gi champion. You just don't have to. You don't have to have that skill set. You can just pull guard every match without penalty. Whereas ADCC, it really does pay to be confident in terms of wrestling. Okay, so another thing about ADCC is, of course, the turtling rule. So if you get taken down in ADCC, if you turtle, or you get taken down or you get swept, and you go to turtle position, you can hang out in turtle position for 3 seconds to avoid the score, and also to avoid any kind of advantages, because there isn't any kind of advantages. This is a really interesting rule. I actually quite like it. It makes it harder to get on the scoreboard. It makes it more difficult for one athlete to get ahead and then hold on to a lead. And that's what we see a lot in IBJJF. That's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of advantages, is because a lot of the times an athlete will look to gain an advantage over their opponent. And then from that situation, instead of trying to win and take it to their opponent, a lot of the time they just try to play to not lose. Okay. And you're always going to see athletes play the rules in any rule set, and myself included, because if you're not doing that, you are not really the smartest athlete, to be totally honest. So if you get taken down, you're going to get taken down and you can't defend the takedown, you can go to turtle. Or if you're going to get swept, you can go to turtle. And the trade-off is you expose your back. And then from the back position, you're now defending someone taking your back and trying to choke you out. But again, very, very hard to score against good opponents. And it creates a lot of scrambles. It's very, very exciting to watch. That's one of the reasons why ADCC is growing in popularity so much, is because it is very, very exciting to watch. Another situation that ADCC allows different controls for the back, body triangles, cross feet. These things all score, whereas in IBJJF, they're very strict about the hooks. And again, I think this is really, really silly. And at the referees meeting that I went to in IBJJF, the Brazilian guy who was running the seminar said basically, well, the reason for that is because the hooks are the only position where your opponent can't attack you. Like there isn't a submission available for your opponent who's defending the back if you have hooks. Whereas if you put a body triangle on or you cross your ankles, you can become exposed to an ankle lock attack. And I thought this reasoning was just so silly because, first of all, those aren't really reliable attacks. I would say maybe at the lower levels they're reliable, but at the higher levels they're really not reliable attacks. And second of all, they actually apply a greater degree of control than just standard open hooks, because open hooks are, of course, unlocked wedges, right? So I don't know about that rule. I'm not a big fan of that one. And ADCC allows you to point harvest in certain situations that IBJJF doesn't. So, for example, in an ADCC situation, you can go from knee on belly to knee on belly and switch sides back and forth. And from doing so, you can gain more and more points. You can just rack up the points. You could go from in rear mount, you could go from a body triangle on one side to a body triangle on the other side and get another set of points, right? You could go from the back with hooks, and then from there, take a leg out, I believe, and then put your legs back in and cross your feet, and you can get more points, right? So you can really point harvest from dominant positions in ADCC, whereas in IBJJF, you can't get extra points for going body triangle from one side to the other or knee on belly from one side to the other. You're just not allowed to do it. And this is also another really interesting difference between IBJJF and ADCC, and that's that there is no cumulative points in ADCC. So in IBJJF, if you pass the guard and go right to mount, you're going to get 7 points, 3 for the pass, 4 for the mount. Whereas in ADCC, you would, I believe, only get points for the guard pass, not the mounted position. So they don't count cumulative points. You would have to pass the guard to a side control and then hold for 3 seconds, and then go to mount and hold for 3 seconds to get those points. So that's a really important to understand the differences between these two rule sets. And you'll see people at every ADCC tournament, at least I have seen at every ADCC tournament I've ever gone to, where IBJJF athletes who are more accustomed to the IBJJF rule set go in and jump in an ADCC tournament. They're wondering why they're not getting scored. And it's because of reasons like this, right? They're playing the ADCC rule set, but they're thinking IBJJF, and you can't do that. You have to be very, very specific, very precise with the decisions you make, especially at the higher levels, right? In the advanced divisions and whatnot. So another thing that's different in ADCC is they score sweeps and takedowns differently. They have a sweep and takedown, of course, which is 2 points, but then they also have something called a clean sweep and a clean takedown, which is where you basically take your opponent down or you sweep them to a position where you're past the guard. So a blast double, and you throw the legs to the side, you land in side control, you get 4 points. Or a sweep, like this example, the bridging side control sweep that we talked about. If you are in bottom side control and you end up on top, now, and top side control, you actually get 4 points instead of 2, which I tend to agree with. I mean, it is advantageous to end up in a position where you're already past your opponent's guard for the most part. So I actually really like that rule, and I think it's a good idea. You know, why not? You land in a better position, get a better score. It makes sense to me. Another thing that's really interesting and very spectator friendly in the ADCC divisions are that fights continue out of bounds. So if there's a scramble out of bounds, guys are fighting, they're going to let them go out of bounds. They're going to let them fight. And, I can remember, I think it was at the last ADCC, we saw Gabby Garcia go off the mats with her opponent, and they were going up the ramp. It looked like WWF, and they're still grappling. The action is still going on. We've seen guys commonly smash into judges' tables and go underneath the tables and go out of bounds, and they just keep fighting and, banging their elbows on the concrete and whatnot. But I guess it's because ADCC doesn't want to stop the action when an athlete could get a advantageous situation, right? And IBJJF has the rule where if you double guard pull, if there's no action, they will stand them up and start again, which actually bit me in the ass last weekend at the BCJJF regionals. I was coming up in a position, and this would have been the Gi match. I was coming up from an ankle lock situation. We had double pulled. We had been on the ground for 20 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever it is. And then as soon as he let go of the ankle lock, I was coming up to the back almost in like a leg drag situation, and the referee stopped the match. And I was kind of pissed because I flanked this guy's leg and I was coming up into a leg drag, almost like from a crab ride situation. I'm like, you motherfucker, like that was my chance to come up to the back. And I talked to him afterward. He's actually a really highly ranked referee in the Pacific Northwest for IBJJF. And he was saying, yeah, well, if it's a double guard pull and the action's not happening and he puts on an ankle lock, and he lets go of the ankle lock, and you're not coming up on top, then I'm supposed to stand it back up. And I was saying, but I was coming up on top. He's like, yes, but you weren't on top. And I was like, all right. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. It doesn't do me any good. But to me, as I was doing it, I thought I was climbing up and making moves to come up on the back. So I think personally, it wasn't a call that, as a referee, even from an impartial perspective, I thought it wasn't really a great call. But that's just my opinion. I also saw the same referee make a very bad call, at least in my opinion. It was later on in the no-gi division when an athlete was he was on his back in the close guard and he was framing on the top athlete's face, and he got DQ'd immediately for framing with his palm over the top athlete's face. Like I said, this is the same referee who made the call that I just complained about. I know IBJJF says, you're not allowed to cover the air holes that your athlete breathes out of and whatnot, and I get that. But I do think that this wasn't really one of those situations. I believe this was a gray area where the player from the guard position was framing across the face and not intending for the frame to be used as a strangle. So, for example, the Python strangle that we've seen Wagner Hocha use, where he uses his palm to cover the defending athlete's breathing holes and cover the mouth and the nose. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like a mount position where the top athlete is literally smothering the face of the bottom athlete. It was simply framing, and there wasn't even a warning. It was just an immediate DQ in the advanced division, and I honestly thought it was kind of ridiculous. I couldn't believe it was a DQ, and that's just the way it goes sometimes, right? Maybe it was the right call because this guy is a very, very highly ranked referee, and I'm not, but in framing across the face, I don't really see too much of an issue with it because it is not being used as a strangle situation. Okay. So we've talked about fleeing out of bounds and how fleeing in ADCC is kind of difficult because the guy can just literally follow you. And we would see that a lot in IBJJF. I see a lot of athletes stay near the edge and then sort of run out knowing that the referee will save them if they get scored on. And ADCC, basically, as long as there's action, they're going to leave that to continue, which is kind of cool. Kind of fun to watch. Kind of fun to watch two athletes go off the edge and they're still scrapping on the concrete or whatever. Like I mentioned earlier, harder to score under the ADCC rule set. And for the reason being that you can turtle when you're getting taken down and swept, and also without the advantages and whatnot. Also, it's important to keep in mind that if your opponent can just turtle and avoid score, it can kind of change some of the positions that you might really favor. So, for example, I've mentioned it before, Craig Jones talks about how he teaches passing to mount, and he recommends passing to mount as opposed to passing to side control. And the reason for doing this is because if your opponent turtles, their back is exposed when you pass to mount. But if you go to side control and they turtle, there's a good chance that they could wrestle up into underhooks and just get back up and avoid the score and even take an offensive position potentially. So he prefers passing to mount. Another situation would be in IBJJF, if you do a takedown and you land in the closed guard, yes, you got your takedown, but now you're in the closed guard and it kind of sucks to be in someone's closed guard. However, in ADCC, you take someone down in the closed guard, it's very, very hard for them to turtle. It's almost impossible to turtle when someone is holding you down in the closed guard and just pinning your hips. So that's another great difference, I guess, that could occur in the strategy contrasting ADCC and IBJJF rule sets. We've already discussed overtime and how that plays out in ADCC, and how that is a really, really unique feature. How in an overtime situation, the athlete can't pull guard without taking a negative point. Very, very interesting situation. And that also in IBJJF, there are penalties for communicating with the referee. We're going to talk about how the referee plays a role in these different rule sets a little bit later, but essentially if you talk to the referee in IBJJF, you get penalized. And it could be anything. You could even just be like a word to them, any words at all. It doesn't even have to be you complaining. It could just be anything, and they can give you a penalty. It really does depend referee to referee. And because of that inconsistency between referees, I think we've seen a lot of criticism come from people from all over the jiu-jitsu community internationally against the IBJJF referees. Sometimes referees know the rules, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they call it a certain way, sometimes they don't. So it kind of depends how ruthless the referee is. But if you talk to the referee in IBJJF, long story short, you get a penalty. It's kind of annoying, right? And also IBJJF has rules with their penalties. I believe on your second penalty, your opponent gets an advantage. On your third penalty, your opponent gets 2 points. And on your fourth penalty, you get DQ'd. So this is something else that also doesn't happen in ADCC. In ADCC, you could get 100 penalties. You could get 1,000 penalties. Doesn't matter. You just get -1 every single time. Okay. Also, ADCC allows you to slam out of submissions, something totally different from IBJJF. IBJJF, there's no slamming at all of any kind. In ADCC, you're allowed to slam out of triangles, whatever type of submissions you're in. And one of the most famous examples of this might be Marcelo Garcia versus Rico Rodriguez when he took his back, and Rico immediately just backdropped on him. He's much larger, and it looked painful. Another example is that comes to mind is Jeff Glover putting Gio Martinez a couple of championships ago. He put him in a triangle, and Gio Martinez picked up Jeff Glover and essentially power bombed him. And I believe that really injured Jeff Glover. And I know he's had back troubles ever since. He has recently had back surgery, I believe. But yeah, that's those slams out of submissions. Honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about him, because it is fair. It's a legit defense, I guess, in terms of the real spirit of fighting. However, it's very dangerous. And, we've seen Tex Johnson get slammed by the late Orlando Sanchez, basically ended his competition career because of his back. At the end of the day, this is a sport. MMA is kind of one thing, MMA, you're allowed to slam on a submissions. Of course, it's a real fight. There's real impact happening. In a grappling match, I'm torn. I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments, should slamming be allowed out of submissions? I tend to think they kind of should, because you can let them go. You can cut the angle when you do a triangle and hook the leg so he can't pick you up. Hard to say, right? And be aware, if you're on someone's back going for a submission, hey, I got to be aware they could slam me right now. All right, recently closeouts have been made illegal in IBJJF. I'm not going to say illegal, but I believe just they can fine you for them. And I think that was a really good choice that IBJJF made to do that, because there was a lot of events that I remember seeing over the last couple of years where you'd watch all day. And speaking of which, Worlds is coming up next week, so that'll be fun. You would watch all day and wait for the finals, and then the finals comes and it's two guys from the Autos and they both close out, or it's the Meow brothers and they close out, or whatever, and it's like, oh man, like that just ruins the event. I know why teammates often don't want to fight each other. I get that, but it does ruin the events. And at the end of the day, IBJJF has to make it more spectator friendly. You can't have multiple divisions in the biggest tournament of the year, and we don't get to see the finals because it's two athletes from the same camp, and then one of them gets their hand raised and then they're applauding and cheering on like they just did something, and it's not good for the sport. It's not good for the IBJJF rule set, or for the organization, I should say, and they adjusted that. So good for them. I love now how there's no closeouts in the biggest tournaments in IBJJF, and I'm looking forward to the Worlds next week. So by the time you hear this, I believe Worlds will already be underway. Okay, another difference is, like we already mentioned, ADCC, in the finals matches, you cannot pull guard. In the overtime matches, you cannot pull guard without a penalty, I should say. And, you know, in IBJJF, you don't need standing skills. ADCC, you got to have some standing skills. At some point, you're going to need them. I'm not going to say nobody hasn't medaled or won ADCC without standing skills, but it's rare. You usually, especially nowadays, jiu-jitsu's really been turning into like wrestle jitsu. There's been a big hybrid of wrestling and BJJ, and it's coming together into this like amazing, exciting, realistic martial art that is that ADCC is really putting forward right now, and it's awesome. So I really like this type of grappling. Another big difference, and it's not really a big difference, but ADCC doesn't test for performance enhancing drugs at all. You can literally come in sauce to the gills and it's all good. Whereas IBJJF, they have now started to test at the highest levels, usually like black belt finals for the adult divisions, right? So even though IBJJF is playing this whole angle that they're cutting out PEDs from their organization, yes, they are in certain ways, but for the most part, you can still get juiced up and go to IBJJF. They only test a very small percentage of the athletes, right? Only the top guys, the guys that are consistently crushing at the highest levels get tested, and pretty much everyone else can go in there juiced up. So let's talk about like scamming the system as so to speak, for IBJJF and ADCC situations. So of course, in IBJJF, you get an advantage. You can sort of sit back on your heels and stall out the rest of the match by an advantage, right? That's very common, and I've done it myself. You know, sometimes you just got to hold on and get that done. And I know Nicholas Murgali and Gordon Ryan and Hodger Gracie would look down upon me for saying that because, you know, they believe that the whole point of jiu-jitsu is to get the submission. And yes, it is true. And yes, we all try to get the submission. We just can't all do it like these guys. But the truth is sometimes you got to do what you got to do to win competitions. And that means, you know, holding on to a point lead or holding on to an advantage, especially at the highest level in Gi, black belt jiu-jitsu, that we see this. And yeah, I think it would be interesting to see Gi jiu-jitsu without advantages. Another thing, and I'm guilty of this, is allowing your opponent to take you down in the ADCC finals. So if it's the finals match in your division and you're going out there, you can't pull at any time without taking a -1 penalty. But at the first part of the match, it is still sub only. There's no points to be given in the first part of the match, but you can still be penalized. So if you sit down in the finals, you take a -1. And then your opponent essentially is up, right? A point, I guess you would say. And they can sort of hold on. And as time goes on and it gets closer to the end of the match, the person who is -1 now has to open up their game and take risks. And this can be a huge issue and really put the pressure on the guard player. So you could do what I did at the ADCC Ottawa Open, and also what Gordon did in his match versus Nicky Rod, which is you give your opponent your leg and they just literally take you down. What I did, I think I talked about it in my match in Ottawa in the finals of the Masters division, not the adult division, unfortunately, but the Masters division. I was going against the guy and I wanted to play on my back, and I just started kicking him in the legs, you know, threatening foot sweeps, and he foot swept me back, and I just literally fell over like a sack of potatoes. I was waiting for him to touch my foot. As soon as he did, I faked a Dayashi, and I faked taking a Dayashi, and I fell on my ass, and I got to the bottom where I wanted to be without taking a penalty, and then I entered his legs and took a heel hook. And I also have discussed on one of the previous episodes how I saw Kieran Kachuk, I almost said Keith Kachuk, famous hockey player. Kieran Kachuk was in the finals versus Mike Demers, who defeated me in the adult division and went on to win the division. And Kieran Kachuk took the -1 point, just sat right down, was happy taking the -1 point. I guess he was that confident in his guard. And of course, it put him down 1 point the entire match. And now the pressure's on him to really produce. And he's got to open up as the last couple of minutes wear down. He ended up getting submitted. So, you know, there's definitely ways to still scam the ADCC rule set, I would say. And of course, sometimes people scam the system by just stalling in 50-50 and trying to win on sweeps. A lot of the time at the higher levels in Gi Jiu Jitsu at IBJJF, we see guys sweeping each other from 50-50. It's just not really exciting jiu-jitsu. It can be, I guess, if you're a nerd, but watching two guys fight to stand up is like from an entangled position, and they can't submit each other from that position often. It's pretty dumb. It's pretty silly. Whereas if you're allowed to do heel hooks from 50-50, it now becomes a very exciting position, and anyone can win at any time. So, I'd personally like to see heel hooks in the gi. Call me sacrilegious, but that's what I would like to see. Okay, just a real quick talk on like memberships and things like that. I mean, IBJJF has a lot of blatant money grabs. They make you pay yearly memberships. They make you, they try and get you to do referees courses and things like that. Black belt authentication fees and things like this. Every year you gotta pay your membership in order to sign up for their tournaments, and their tournaments are fucking expensive. They're like $125 to $150 a division, American dollars. I'm Canadian, so our money is like monopoly money, right? Very fucking expensive to go and compete in IBJJF, and generally no cash prizes unless you are Kynan Dwarch or Tynan Dalpra or, the best of the best. They're getting like maybe 30-40 grand if they win worlds. I don't know. ADCC requires no paid annual membership that I know of, no rank certification, because there is no ranks. It's there's only one rank, and that's expert. However, these ADCC Opens that are popping up everywhere, like the one that just happened in Ottawa and Costa Mesa, and there's one next month in Dallas, and then one is actually coming to Vancouver, which we'll talk about a little bit later in August. These ADCC Opens require no membership or rank certification. There is, there is going to be other divisions for kids now at these ADCC Opens, and also for lower ranks. So I believe there's beginner. I don't know if there's intermediate rank, but I know at least there is beginner rank. There's kids, and there is, of course, advanced. So this is cool. I like how it's not broken down into belts like IBJJF is. And IBJJF, of course, very, very strict about your attire. You have to be wearing, almost everyone I know has had issues with gi check at some point or another, or wearing a rash guard that didn't fall in line with the rank that you represent in IBJJF competition. I mean, it can get really, really frustrating. I've seen some people not be able to compete because of the gis that they brought, or because of the rash guards that they have. And that can be extremely frustrating, especially if you're traveling from someplace and then you go to a big IBJJF tournament and they're like, oh, your rash guard doesn't have a high enough percentage of purple on it because you're a purple belt, so you can't wear this, right? Just kind of really rigid, silly rules I find into the IBJJF organization. But then again, you could look at it and say, yeah, it looks more professional, doesn't it? And to some degree, maybe it does. Okay, now let's discuss the role of the referee in both IBJJF and ADCC situations. So first of all, ideally, the referee shouldn't really play a huge role in the outcome of a match. One thing that I remember a referee saying at an MMA meeting when I was coaching one of my athletes at an MMA event, the referee was giving the pre-fight get-together, I guess, the rules meeting with all the fighters, and he said, listen, I'm not the star of the show. You guys are the star of the show. I don't even want to really be a star of the show. I don't want to get involved if I don't have to. I'll jump in if I have to save someone's life or if there's blood or whatever. But otherwise, I don't really even want to play a factor in the outcome of this event. And that's how it should be. Of course, we should never leave it in the hands of the referee, especially in IBJJF when referees are making decisions and whatnot. But sometimes the referee does play a role, and I feel like it's best if they don't. I enjoy refereeing. I like it because it makes me a better teacher, makes me a better competitor, makes me understand jiu-jitsu better. There's many reasons why I like it. I like it because every time I referee local tournaments, it's good for my business. People see me, they come say, hi, oh, I know you, what gym do you own, blah, blah, blah. You could gain potential students and training partners, and it's good optics for you if you have a business that revolves around jiu-jitsu. If you get out there and you referee and you contribute to your community and you network, it can be very, very beneficial for you in many ways. And you guys seeing this right now? My cat's just running across. Here, look at this guy. Get out of here. Anyways, That's what you get with this show. This is the conditions I have to deal with around here. Anyways, already talked about why I like to referee, the benefits of it, especially as an entrepreneur. The referee is a great way to meet people and to really give back to the jiu-jitsu community. And it's just good experience. I look at being a referee as like solving the puzzle of jiu-jitsu right in front of me. It's challenging, but I find it fun. I know a lot of people find it nerve-wracking and stressful. Maybe that's like the potential downside of it. Usually you make a couple $100 when you referee. But I don't really mind if people are all watching me make a decision based around jiu-jitsu. For me, it's enjoyable, and it's kind of fun too when parents yell at you because they don't like the calls. A lot of the time when a parent is upset with you about the call you made, if you're a good referee, it's them who is lacking particular knowledge, right? So I don't really see a lot of downsides to refereeing other than that it takes a ton of energy away from you if you're planning on competing that day. The referee is the uncontrollable variable. You cannot control the referee. You cannot control the decisions the referee makes. You can only control what you can control in the match. That's what you can do to your opponent. So that extra uncontrollable variable does throw a monkey wrench into your potential plans. You might not get the score that you're looking for or that you felt you deserved, and all of a sudden now you're behind, and in your mind you shouldn't be, but the way that the match is played, you have to be thinking about the next problem to solve, the next fire to be put out. This cat is just like walking in front right now. Can you at least just fucking sit down and chill? Jesus Christ. All right. In IBJJF, this is okay. This is a very interesting difference between IBJJF and ADCC. In IBJJF, the referee does all the scoring and has all the authority. Aside from the finals matches where there's usually two other referees sitting on the opposite corners of the mats. So in IBJJF, the referee is like, for the majority of the matches, unless it's the highest level black belt finals, you're going to see the referee making all the decisions. Okay. You're going to see them making all the calls for the majority of these matches. And it puts a tremendous amount of stress on the referee, especially when the referee is trying to think about a call that they may have missed as the action is continuing. So they have to now compute what they just saw and compute what they're watching currently and continue to score the match. So it's very, very difficult. Now, recently, for some of these matches, they have people in the, quote, war room or whatever you want to call it, people who are watching the footage aside from the referee, who are talking to the referee through an earpiece. And again, this is more of something that you'll see in finals divisions, maybe for brown and black belt, but probably not for like your average blue belt match. But I have seen decisions get overturned through an earpiece in IBJJF. And this is interesting. Contrast that with ADCC now. ADCC, the referee is actually not the authority. The referee is not even really the referee. There are two referees that sit at the table who are, I guess, keeping score and refereeing the match. And the referee in ADCC kind of plays the role of the communicator between the table and the athletes. Very, very interesting. I've thought about this a lot, and I really, really like this actually because it gives the point scoring situation to two different people who are sitting on the sidelines, and they get to make an impartial kind of third person or bird's eye view decision based on what they just saw. Whereas in IBJJF, it's that person right there. It's only one person making the decision, and they have to make it right now, and they also have to keep watching. So I find that because of this difference, because ADCC puts the responsibility of scoring on the tabled referees and not the referee on the floor, I think that we end up getting less blunders. ADCC, you see less mistakes. That's not to say that there is no mistakes. There certainly is, but I think there is definitely less mistakes under this format. I think by taking that responsibility away from the referee and giving it to other people, it makes it easier for everyone. And it takes a lot of the stress off of the referee in an ADCC situation. So I would say that like generally the ref has less responsibility in ADCC. You do see referees counting. So they'll count like, oh, there's a pass, 1, 2, 3. Then the table gives them the confirmation, and then they communicate that there's been points. Or maybe they don't even communicate that there's points. I'm not sure if it just goes up or if they score, but I have seen ADCC refs give gestures of counting scores. And I like that. I would say there is less blunders in the referee department at ADCC, at least from what I've seen. Another thing is you're allowed to communicate with the ref in ADCC. They don't penalize you for talking to them or asking them questions. And this, I think, is great because I just think it's good if a competitor can communicate with the referee. I think it's not good if a competitor decides to be rude to a referee or to harass a referee for making a call they didn't like. That being said, I think that an athlete should have the ability to say, hey, what about that call right there? And then keep fighting. And if the referee chooses to acknowledge it or not, so be it. But at least we gave the athlete the right to say something in a polite, concise way. I think that there's nothing wrong with that as long as, like I said, it's done respectfully. So you are allowed to communicate with the referees in ADCC. And one thing that happened to me when I was in Ottawa was I remember coaching one of my athletes, and the referee actually corrected me as I gave advice. He was like, no, there's no points there because of this and this. He justified his reasoning why there wasn't a score. And I thought about it and I said, you're right. Thank you for educating me. And I found that the IBJJF, IBJJF referees are, I don't want to say stuck up, but they have this attitude that like you are not to talk to them, almost like you're not worthy of talking to them because of their rules that protects them from communication. Whereas ADCC, the referees were really keen on educating me on the rules. Very cool stuff. I actually really liked it. I thought that all the referees were friendly and pretty damn effective in the ADCC Open that I did in Ottawa. All right, let's contrast the tournament experience that you might encounter between these two organizations. So, like I said, the ADCC officials, the referee on the floor, and the two referees at the tables, they tried to educate us. Every table I went to multiple tables. Referees are educating the coaches and the competitors about the rules. They want you to know about the rules. If they hear you say something that they think isn't correct, they'll even butt into your conversation and tell you, hey, no, this is why that was scored, or that's not scored because of this. And if you had questions, you could go up and ask, and they'd be happy to tell you. I even had, I kind of had the third quarter tournament coffee cravings that I always have. I'm such a fiend for caffeine at ADCC Ottawa. There's nowhere to get a coffee. And I saw that they had some to-go coffees there, the kind that you pour out of a box from a Starbucks or a Tim Hortons. And I said, hey man, I'm dying here. Can I get a coffee? Can I buy one off you? And this is like one of the organizers. He's like, dude, just take one. I was like, man, this is so cool. Like, yes, maybe it's a little bit less professional because really it's not their responsibility to be giving you coffee. But at the same time, they're personable. They're humble. They wanted you to have a good experience. That was one thing that was really, really cool. I found that the staff at the ADCC events were much more welcoming, willing to talk to you. And like I said, in IBJJF, sometimes you go into an IBJJF division and it feels like you're walking into a factory. They funnel you in, they put you in the warm-up area, then you go to the bullpen. They're very strict about your gi, and, they're not really welcoming, friendly people. They just get you in, get you out. ADCC people were, very kind, laughing with you. It was a cool vibe in there. That being said, again, probably not as professional, almost more like a Naga vibe. And I don't know if that's a compliment or a diss to ADCC, but I love Naga tournaments, and recently the Naga tournaments in the Pacific Northwest they become pretty low level as of late. I know a lot of higher level guys used to compete in Nagas. The last couple Nagas I've been to in Everett, Washington, were not the highest level competitors for the black belts, but the actual tournament atmosphere I really like. I like that relaxed tournament atmosphere where it's fun to go to. And even though the IBJJF has the nice blue and yellow theme, it can be annoying to go there and deal with jerk offs. And I've done it multiple times. So I find the staff at ADCC is doing a really great job. However, IBJJF does have ADCC Opens defeated in one department, and that's that IBJJF has warm-up areas. ADCC Opens, at least the ones that I've been to, do not have warm-up areas. And I think this will change because ADCC Opens are a relatively new thing. And they've already got a ton of great momentum, as of course, ADCC trials explode in popularity every year. I think these ADCC Opens are going to continue to grow in popularity. And as there's more and more money going into the ADCC organization, we're going to see them change aspects of the tournament and probably make it more big, more official. I don't want to say just like IBJJF, but probably we'll see some similarities. And of course, I'm sure at a lot of these divisions, we'll start seeing warm-up mats and things like that. Oh yeah, another thing ADCC does that's kind of cool is at the end of their divisions, they do the finals kind of at the end of the day, at least for the adult divisions, not for the masters divisions. I did my master division final pretty much immediately, just like it was any other match, but all of the other athletes in the advanced adult divisions, they finish their semifinal match, and then hours later, they all get together and they do all the finals matches one after the other. They also do this at the trials, and man, it is cool. It is, it's a totally different experience to see something like this. It's like, it just brings hype around it, and it's fun. It's like you're watching a super fight or something. You know, these athletes have been on the sidelines, or they go crawl somewhere in the building to go take a nap for a couple hours, and they're thinking about what this giant match is going to be to them. It's fun. It's really cool. I like that a lot. And it's very, very spectator friendly. Okay, we're almost done here. Let's talk about something that I'd like to see, and that is ADCC Gi tournaments. I think this would be the coolest thing ever. You know, have the exact same rules, but with the gis only. Of course, ADCC, you're allowed to wear a gi, and I believe Emil Fischer did that at the last ADCC trials, West Coast trials. Perhaps he wore a gi with a white belt. He's actually a black belt, just to, I guess, troll people. And it was funny. I think he lost his first match, obviously putting himself at a disadvantage. I mean, it's silly as well, but it is funny. I think ADCC divisions with the gi rules, you know, no advantages, no point scoring period followed by points, followed by overtime where you can't pull guard without a negative point. Like, I think it would be a totally cool type of jiu-jitsu. And of course, I would love to see things like heel hooks in the gi. I've been calling for this forever. You know, if IBJJF decided tomorrow that they're going to allow heel hooks in the gi, we would see a completely different style of jiu-jitsu. Open guard would definitely be funneled towards leg attacks, things like that. You know, all of a sudden you got guys heel hooking each other in the gi. 50-50 becomes an exciting position. I think ADCC in the gi would be such an awesome tournament. I would love to see ADCC gi tournaments. Probably not going to happen though, but that would be fun. And it would be more spectator friendly, I believe. I find that stalling is more difficult under the ADCC rule set because of the way that you can get penalties right away. Of course, just watch like Craig Jones versus Kynan Dwarch last tournament, the last World Championships. Kynan racked up a ton of penalties. I can't remember how many he had. I think it was almost 10. And even Craig came off the mats. He's like, I don't know why he got all those penalties. He was just passing my guard and pressuring him, right? But nonetheless, I think it is harder to stall under ADCC. And I really like how ADCC is sort of expanding their brand, like I mentioned earlier, with kids divisions, with opens, with other difficulties aside from expert divisions. It's really great for their brand, I think. And there's a lot of excitement behind these ADCC opens. And, these tournaments are filling up. So I don't think they have anything to worry about in terms of getting good turnouts. Okay, let's now discuss a quote. So this quote kind of relates to my situation that I had on the weekend at my tournament. You know, getting buggy choked in front of everyone by a purple belt, not really the most fun thing to do. I don't care if the guy looked like LeBron James. He was a friggin' statue. Still, it's embarrassing. But just remember, George E. Woodbury once said, defeat is not the worst of failures. Not to have tried is the true failure. And basically, that's self-explanatory. And that's kind of my motto in life is if you don't try for something, like really that is the true failure. Having a potential but not reaching your full potential is the definition of hell. I can't remember who said that quote, but I think it's very, very true. And that's why I compete. You know, it's not about just always winning medals, but the ups and the downs. And I remember a couple of days before the tournament, kind of thinking about my matches and knowing how good that Lucas Wilhan is in the gi and thinking to myself, like, man, can I beat this guy? Like, no gi's different. Sub only no gi's different. Now we're adding IBJJF rules and points. He's bigger. I mean, it kind of favors him. And I was thinking, can I win? And am I going to have a good day? And is it going to be one of those days where I get embarrassed? And it was. And, I was literally thinking that to myself, thinking of how many people I've seen get caught on highlight reel submissions. You see it all the time. You see it at every tournament. People getting caught in highlight reel submissions, highlight reel sequences, and being on the receiving end. And I was thinking, like, man, is this going to be a day where I end up like that? And oddly enough, it was. And you kind of just gotta appreciate it. You gotta appreciate how amazing jiu-jitsu is in that way, and how anyone can win when something is well applied. It really is a chess game and a game of cat and mouse sometimes. And it's one of the reasons why jiu-jitsu is so amazing, and why I keep doing it, and why I'm going to keep doing it, and why I'm going to keep competing, even though it sucks so fucking bad to lose. It's to not have tried is the true failure. Plus, when I compete, generally, it's a great marketing strategy for me as a gym owner as well. So I really like it for that reason as well, aside from my own personal growth. All right, let's discuss what I'm doing next. So I said this weekend there's going to be the Prime BJJ series. It's the second time that they've had an event. It's in Vancouver. Basically, it's exactly the same as the IBJJF model, but it should be very enjoyable. The first one was awesome. I'm going to be refereeing at this one as well and competing. I don't know if I have any matches, but hopefully I do a lot better than this fucking weekend. And then after that, on July 2nd, the day after Canada Day, IBJJF goes to Portland for the Portland Open. There's a gi and no gi division. I don't know. I'd love to compete in that one. Haven't done an IBJJF tournament in a long time. And of course, later on in August 19th, ADCC Vancouver Open is coming, and it's going to be awesome. I'm already in camp for this tournament. I'm kind of always in camp because I want to be able to compete at any time in terms of my conditioning and my mindset and everything. But I'm definitely thinking about that one, and I'm trying to get as many people that I know locally to go to this tournament and support it, because we want these people to come back. It is so good for jiu-jitsu to have an organization like ADCC come to Vancouver, because for some fucking dumb reason, IBJJF would never come here. I don't understand, but they just don't. Anyways, ADCC Vancouver, and then I believe the week after is Masters Worlds, which I'm also doing the week of August 26th, or I believe it is, and that's going to also have Jiu-Jitsu Con, which is the biggest jiu-jitsu event of the year. It's going to be in Las Vegas. I'm going to that. I'm hoping to do 3 tournaments in 3 days. Masters Worlds, Jiu-Jitsu Con Gi Adult, Jiu-Jitsu Con No Gi Adult. It's probably going to be really, really tough, but it should be friggin' awesome. Great experience. I did it before COVID, and man, it was fun. Loved it. Also, I just wanted to say I really think Tynan Dalper is probably going to win the middleweight division. That's the division that I'm looking forward to most. It's got guys like Andy Murasaki, Ty Rotolo in it. I believe Espen Mathiasen, I believe his name is. He's in there. Man, it is going to be wicked. I'm looking forward to Worlds this year for sure. All right, guys, that's our discussion on ADCC versus IBJJF. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too boring. Maybe if you are more of a beginner, you found it beneficial in terms of the rules. And could I name every single difference between these two organizations this episode? No, but I hope that you empower yourself and go and study the rules of these tournaments so that you are more prepared when you go in and compete. Check out IBJJF Tutorials. It is a great YouTube channel from the IBJJF, and it really helped me when I was first refereeing my very first tournaments. And they basically have all these awesome videos that help you get more in tune with the rules. Check that out, IBJJF Tutorials. Now I'd like to talk about how you can contact and support the show. Check out my website, ejjp.show. Of course, you can follow us on Instagram at The Essential Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. You can email me at ejjpod@gmail.com. If you'd like to support me, you can check out the On Guard Online Academy. You can find that at www.onguardbjj.com. I have an online academy there. I put all of my lessons that I teach, my competition footage, if you like watching me lose, other things, kids section, referee section. You can find this all for just $10 a month at the online On Guard BJJ Academy. Please check that out. Of course, last but not least, Zara Can Do Jiu-Jitsu. It's my kids' book that I wrote about my daughter Zara, who does jiu-jitsu with me, and it is a great family book, a great book to introduce kids to martial arts, especially ones that work. And that is Zara Can Do Jiu-Jitsu, available in Friesen Press and of course in Amazon. And that's the show, guys. I hope you liked it. And please feel free to like, share, subscribe, tell your training partners about this show. If you like it, if you think it helped you, if it has enhanced your jiu-jitsu. Of course, you can email me and message me on Instagram if you have any questions or ideas for future shows. I would love to bring your ideas if I like them and discuss them. All right, so I'm going to sound off now, guys. Remember, the Essential Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. See you next time.